All right, and we're on. Let's see if I can do this without getting my own shadow all the time.
Right.
Okay. Well, good morning. I'm here in my backyard with Tonia from the Home Orchard Society Arboretum. And besides being the manager there, she's also a private fruit consultant and caretaker. And so I just wanted to give you guys an example of what that would look like to do that sort of job and the kind of real-time suggestions that you might hear. So she's here. She's going to take a look around at what I've got and remark on it, suggest some management tactics, pruning, pests and disease, all that stuff. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris.
All right.
So the first thing I typically ask my clients when I go into their backyards, I'm not necessarily directionally, I guess I would say I'm slightly directionally challenged. So I always ask which direction the sun is traveling, right? And so I imagine your sun is traveling.
You got it. That's
this?
directly east.
Okay,
Yep.
so east and you got west over here. So that just sort of helps me sort of figure out, first of all, are you getting enough sun? And you've got plenty of sun in your backyard. So
we've got a pretty big limitation in the afternoon there.
Okay, yeah. So probably about 1 o'clock?
Yeah, maybe 2 o'clock, yeah.
Okay, so this little little fig tree is probably getting, you know, your morning sun, 6 hours of sun a day.
At least, yeah.
Okay, good. So that's always good. So we have a little fig tree here, and looks pretty young. How long has it been in the ground?
3 years, I think.
Okay, what's the variety?
It's either Desert King or Latarula. It came from cuttings we did in class.
Okay, so the first thing I would say is Desert King Latarula, the mature height, I hope you know, it wants to be about 25 feet. Okay, so I always look at the spacing of where people have planted stuff, and then sort of make recommendations upon that. So if you want to keep this thing small, you're either going to have to pollard it, cut it really hard every few years, and summer pruning only. Summer pruning is going to help keep the tree a little bit smaller, where winter pruning is going to encourage a whole bunch of growth. Another thing that is kind of tricky to sort of play around with is water. So definitely most of your fruit trees are going to, well, 100% all of your fruit trees, while they're establishing themselves, they're going to need regular watering. But another thing that water and food does is it makes plants grow. So the one thing we want to do with this one is not feed it so much, and once it's established, and it's established now, so you can cut back on the water, especially with figs. They really don't need a whole lot of water at all. I would always suggest looking for signs of stress and water accordingly, and make sure you're paying attention to your weather patterns, and you know, weeks where it's going to be over 100 degrees, supplement their water then. But don't just arbitrarily give it a ton of water because you think it's going to die if it doesn't have water. They're typically not going to. It's just going to push a whole lot of excessive vegetative growth if you're overwatering your plants.
Yeah, so one idea we had for this one, that one just got stuck in the ground there without much planning, was to this winter when it's wet and cool, to move it over there by the fence.
Yep, nice open space over there. And then with figs, another thing that we talk about is, currently this one is a single trunk fig tree, and so some fig varieties are good at being single trunk, and they don't push out a whole lot of suckers. Some figs tend to sucker quite a bit, and so one of the things that we do with figs to help eat up the vigor and help prevent against frost damage is let them grow as a bush, so a multi-trunked fig tree.
Okay, so is it too late for that here, or what would I have to do?
Not at all. So I would, if you see any suckers coming up, I would go ahead and let those go.
So right from the base there?
Yep, right from below the soil line is where suckers come from. When we talk about water shoots, those are coming from the above ground portion of the tree.
Okay. Yeah, that's. I think that's what we'd be going for, is not 25 feet tall.
Yeah, they get a little bit hard to reach the fruit and sort of manage their pruning when they become too big. I see you did some pruning on it already. You cut to outward facing buds. That's great. I'm always looking for an open canopy. You've got a spreader in here to help with that process, and that's a really good idea. This is just a field-fashioned spreader, if you will.
Yeah, it's a free one.
Yep, and that works just great. you know, anytime you see stuff coming in the inside, you want to get rid of that. Yeah, this looks like a nice start to a beautiful tree.
I got a couple bricks there pulling those branches down on the backside.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so that's another method that you use. You know, anything you can find. If you go to old antique stores, you can find little tree weights, which are kind of cute to use. But a brick, piece of wood, I tend to use landscape staples sometimes.
Ah, okay.
And so that's a really cheap, inexpensive way to get them in there and attach them.
Cool. So this one, so far this year, I got about 6 ripe figs off of there.
Awesome. And was the interior pink or golden?
Pink.
So that's a Desert King.
Cool.
So yeah, the golden interior is the Latarulas, and Desert Kings typically give me a pretty good early crop, which is the Breba crop, and they don't really give me a whole lot of the fall crop. So right now we've got fall figs. Some of them may mature, but we may not have a hot enough summer in order to get them all to mature. I wouldn't be worried if some of them fell off. And then I can see next year's Breba crop right at the tip there.
Ooh, okay.
Right? So this is one of the cautions about pruning figs in the summer is if you have a fig tree, a variety that does a much better Breba crop or first crop, you want to be careful because you cut a lot of the tips off, so your Breba crop gets kind of knocked down. So this is where you're going to have figs next year. I can see one right there.
Okay. So I might have cost myself a few of those for next year.
Maybe, and that's, you know, sometimes that's okay. We sacrifice a lot of fruit in order to get better fruit in return. So, you know, this is, nice short shoots that are closer to where you want them to be. Those are the ones that you're going to hold on to. Some of the stuff that gets super, super long, those are okay to cut off. We're just going to have to sacrifice it, and that's going to be fine.
Yeah, I'm always trying to think long term, like,
Exactly.
in 5 years, I want to be getting some good fruit off of this thing that I can reach.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, for sure.
great. Well, that one seems to be going well. It doesn't, pest and disease wise, not bad. This
So
leaf
pest
is
and dis-
riffed up a little bit, but
Yeah, I would just say that that's environmental damage.
yeah,
you
I
know,
think that's
something-
probably dog damage.
Yeah, probably. So I'm starting to see at the Home Orchard Society Arboretum, I'm starting to see some fig disorder, and it's endosepsis of figs. So that's brown
Does
rot.
not sound good.
Yeah, that's brown rot of figs, and it knocked out the second half of my early crop, and it may impact my fall crop. And so there's very little research on this, and so I'm probably going to have to call around to UC Davis, because those are the people that are really growing figs extensively. And so they've got a pretty good fig education program, and hopefully they can give me some insight into how to best treat it.
Huh.
'Cause
Do you see it on leaves, shoots, fruit?
You will see it on the fruit, and you'll see it on the butt end of the fruit or the bottom end of the fruit. And so it'll look like a water-soaked stain. And then when you pop the fruit open, half of it will be ripe or overripe, and the other half will not be ripe at all. So it's rotten on one side, basically.
Okay, and that's a fungal disease, or
That is,
Yeah.
yes. And it's spread by bugs that go inside the fruit. And if he touches something that's diseased, it goes into another fruit, and then he infects that secondary fruit. And because it's inside, any sort of sprays that you use aren't going to be able to get to it. So you've got to figure out a way to deal with the bug as opposed to dealing with a spray on the outside.
So
Yeah.
what are you doing so far for that?
Crossing my fingers
Yeah.
and hopefully getting them off a little bit earlier than when they would be fully ripe.
Okay. It's interesting. A little bit of change in the climate and change
Definitely.
in the pest situation.
Yep. We need a really harsh winter to kill off some of the overwintering insects.
Mm-hmm. And would that same harsh winter affect the fig tree? Or
Usually not. For figs that are specifically geared towards Pacific Northwest weather. So Latarula and Desert King are both very cold hardy figs. There are some that we obviously can't grow here. Mission, Black Spanish, you can a little bit if you've got a really nice hot pocket in your backyard. But that's another reason why we do the bush form. If you lose one limb to frost, you can you
I
have
see.
multiple.
You've got a plan B for
you've
the
got
main
multiple
shoot.
trunks.
Yeah.
I've had quite a few figs die back to the ground, and then they'll shoot back up. You know, if we have a really hard winter, you know, smaller trees like this of this size have the probability of dying back to the ground and then shooting back up from the roots.
You know, this one in its very first year, the dog came through and knocked it over, and you know, at that point it was maybe a 8-inch stick, and it came right back.
Once the root system is in there, the root system's in there, right? You know, so the roots are pretty well adapted to the soil temperatures, right? But it's just the above ground portion that has the tendency to either get broken off or freeze off or get some sort of damage to where it dies back.
Cool. It's like a semi-hardy perennial in that way. Like it won't die, but it'll die back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.